How do you think I can help you? What can we do? What should we do?
Well, um, I'm not gonna lie. I've been working on my improvisation for years now, and I just am at this really frustrating point where I don't really feel like I'm getting better, but I'm not really getting worse either. And it's frustrating because I know that there's so much more I could be doing better, and I just don't know how to do that. And I'm getting all these different opinions, and each one kind of just contradicts the other. Like, I was in a lesson not too long ago, and the person told me I just needed to transcribe 10 solos and then that'd be better. And then Todd Campbell, who I was taking lessons with over the summer, told me that transcribing isn't as important as practicing licks, learning licks in all 12 keys, and then doing that over chord changes and just kind of applying what you're learning. And then I've had people telling me any combination of those things. I've had people tell me that I need to write solos out with the licks that I've already learned. So I'm just kind of like, I transcribe, in the words of Clark Terry, I imitate and I assimilate. I just don't know what to do with that. I'm not really at a point where I'm innovating. I'm just kind of stagnating.
Yeah. Okay. Is there some way I could get some idea of where you're at, so I got a better idea of what to tell you?
Um, yeah. So, um, I will say, in my opinion, I'm a pretty decent transcriber. I've transcribed a couple of solos recently. I would say since I've probably transcribed 10 to 12 solos total so far.
Uh-huh.
And then individual licks, not entire solos, it's probably in the low 50s at this point.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, definitely could be doing a lot more though.
Is there a tune you've been working on you could play for me, or play something?
Yeah. Um, I have been working on Autumn Leaves, not necessarily the changes as much as I should be. And then I've also transcribed a Roy Hargrove solo here in the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
So which one would you like to hear?
Yeah, let's hear Autumn Leaves.
Okay.
Now, can you improvise? Improvise on it?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So let me ask you this. I'm going to play for a second.
All right.
Tell me what tune you hear. Sorry.
Hmm. Well, I definitely heard you making changes, like 2 5s and
Okay.
1.
Okay.
Um, I really want to say that's Autumn Leaves because it felt like you were just alternating between the 1 and the 2 in the key progression. Uh, but I could be wrong.
No, I was right. It was Autumn Leaves. Yeah. In other
Uh,
words, you should be able to tell. This is really the acid test. If I'm actually improvising, you should be able to tell what tune I'm playing with no backing track and no reference to the melody, right? Does that make
yeah.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me try a different tune. See if you can tell what this is. Of course, for you to be able to tell what it is, you kind of have to have some clue about maybe you've ever played it before, or you
Yeah.
have worked on the changes some, or you've ever listened to it. Otherwise, you won't know what it is. But if you know the flow, it's all right. Got any clues yet?
Oh,
One
there
time.
was. Okay, I know this is wrong, but the tune that kept coming to my head was I Remember Clifford.
Okay. Yeah. Once I put that in your mind, then you can probably hear these chord changes. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
probably hearing it. Yeah. Well, the fact that you didn't get that probably suggests that maybe you don't know the tune quite as well as you should, but you kind
Oh,
of,
definitely not.
at least you're aware of the tune. Yeah.
That was Blue Bossa, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
I was trying to pick something else simple that maybe you'd done before, but the the fact is, the acid test is that I should be able to tell from the notes you're playing what chord progression you're playing if I have any clue about what that tune is in the first place, of course. But I'll give you an example. I was teaching at the Birch Creek Music Camp in Wisconsin,
Mhm.
and I directed a combo in the 11 o'clock hour, but it really made me itch to play. And so when noon came, we were supposed to go to lunch. I just started playing, and I started playing All the Things You Are. I never played the melody. I didn't have any backing track, but I just improvised on the changes. And I fooled around with that for about 25 minutes. And I thought, man, I'm going to miss lunch. I threw the horn in the case, rushed over to lunch, barely got through the line before they closed it. Came with my tray to sit down. There was some camp faculty sitting around one of the tables, and I sat down next to the guitar player from the camp faculty. And after a minute, he said, "Was that you playing All the Things You Are over in the barn?" You see, he knew what it was because I was playing the notes that would say, "This is all the things you are." Uh, one other experience I'll share with you. I was playing in my BYU office, and I had an hour earlier. I had played the head. This is where I was working on Just Friends, but I hadn't played the head for an hour, and I wasn't working with any backing track. And the student who was supposed to come in an hour later knocked on the door. I said, "Come in." He came in and walked over to the other end of the room, and he started to get his horn out of the case. But I just kept playing, just improvising on the changes to Just Friends. After a minute, he said, "Just Friends?" Yes. So this is going to be my point, that if you hadn't played the melody, I would have no clue what you were trying to do.
Hmm.
And see, that's where improvisation is not going where it needs to go. And I agree that transcribing is probably the single most important thing that you can do. But I also think it really helps to have a little bit of theory to help you on some of this stuff. And I want to share a couple of ideas with you.
All
Um,
right.
I, in a lot of ways, learning to improvise is very much like learning to talk. In fact, that was Suzuki's whole idea, the mother tongue approach. You learn to play the same way you learn how to talk. Well, how did you learn to talk?
By imitating.
Yes, by listening and imitating. But then later, you learned how to read it. You had some visual symbols. Okay, you remember that sound you've been making, dog? Here's what it looks like on a chalkboard, DOG. You start learning what the visual representations are for those sounds. That's kind of what theory is. And then later, you had to diagram sentences. You had to be able to figure out, here's the subject, here's the verb, here's the adjectives. This is a prepositional phrase, and so on.
Yeah.
uh, but that's not how you think when you while you talk now. I mean, I think that studying grammar is useful, but I don't think that's actually how you. I mean, if you're going to say, I got to talk to Ray. Let me see. I need a noun and I need a verb and maybe an adjective. Yeah.
And then you can't end the sentence with a prepositional phrase.
Right. You don't think that way when you talk. And every time you talk, you're improvising. You realize that. I mean, you didn't script that out just a minute ago and memorize it and then
No.
regurgitate it. You're just improvising. So I think the single most important thing you can do is transcribe. I think the second most important thing you can do is learn tune after tune after tune after tune. Uh, by the way, I need to clarify on transcribing. When you're transcribing, are you transcribing it to paper and writing it down?
No. In fact, Todd Campbell told me not to even waste my time with that.
Yeah. Okay, that's good because if you're sitting there writing it down, it's not going to have nearly the impact in your playing that you want it to. Years ago, there was an article in Downbeat magazine, and it was an interview with Branford and Winton, Marcellus, and at a certain point, the interviewer asked Winton about transcribing, and Winton said, "I never transcribe. I don't believe in it." What? I've seen him in live clinics talk about. That's no way. That's right. I read it again. I thought there's got to be some kind of typo here. I puzzled over it a little bit longer. Finally, I read on, and Branford says, "Yeah, I don't either. I just learned to play it on my horn." And then I realized that he was using the literal meaning of transcription, which is to write it on paper. But what Winton was saying, I don't feel like that's valuable. I transcribe it to the horn is really what they were both saying, which I think is right. I just want to make sure that's what you're doing because you're going to get a lot more towards your soloing from transcribing if you learn it to the horn. Now, I did give you one more perspective on it. Jim Snydero. I don't know if you ever heard that name or not. He's a
No.
he's a great New York City saxophone player, Jim Snydero. He told me what he does is he transcribes the whole thing to the horn, and then he sits down. He puts the horn in the case, sits down at the table, and makes himself write the solo down without the use of his horn. That's a completely different process. It's a different set of skills. But the important skills are that you're learning it to your instrument. The second thing is learning a lot of tunes. And I'll just tell you a quick story on that. J.B. Dias, probably never heard of him. Uh,
Nah.
he's moved on. I'm not positive where he is, but he was directing the Brubeck Institute in Stockton, California. And he's a bass player today and a very good musician. Um, I heard him tell us about this experience at a IAJE conference. Do you know IAJE? It preceded Jen.
No.
IAJE was the International Association of Jazz for Jazz Education, and JAN, of course, is a Jazz Education Network, which took its place, really. But this was an IAJE thing, so it's been a few years back. But I heard JB tell about when he was a high school student, he was a guitar player. Now he's a known as a bass player more, but he was playing guitar. He said he never had any lessons. He had so many questions. He finally got up the nerve to call the guy that was teaching at the local university and ask if he could take guitar lessons. The guy was not very much into teaching high school kids, but he said after a minute, well, okay, come on over. So JB went to the lessons, and he was like a kid in a candy shop being able to ask these questions he'd had, and he was asking questions. Well, I think this teacher obviously wasn't much of a teacher because he was actually put off by the fact that the kid was asking him a lot of questions. And so he said, in the fourth lesson, he said, I'm going to give you an assignment. When you got the assignment done, then call me and we'll have another lesson. Oh, okay. What is it? Learn 100 tunes.
Jeez.
Are you kidding? Why would I learn 100 tunes before I have another lesson? He says, because by the time you've learned 100 tunes, you won't have all those stupid questions. Now, that's kind of cruel, but there's a lot of truth in it, actually. Because in learning tunes, you learn a lot about theory and how the melody works with the changes and how they chose those notes and stuff. And it's a very useful thing. But the third valuable thing, I think, and this is assuming that you can play the instrument already. I mean, the first valuable thing would actually be learning to play, to control this piece of metal. You got to do that. But then, as far as jazz is concerned, transcription, learning tunes. But then I think it is helpful to learn theory. And learning theory is like learning grammar. In the final analysis, you may not be just sitting there thinking about theory when you're playing, but it will help you a lot. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, what I feel is missing in your playing, I didn't hear a lot of wrong notes, but the problem is I didn't hear a lot of right notes either.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear notes that's like, oh, that's a glaringly a wrong note. You realize that on these that you could play in the key of C through that entire thing and sound pretty good.
Yeah, because A is the relative minor to C.
That's right. That's right. And you can actually through with C major scale stuff, and and if you got a rhythm section backing you up, you might sound pretty good because you not sound like you're playing anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But let's pull the rhythm section away from you. Now what does it sound like? Nothing. You can't tell anything about what it is. And that's kind of what I felt from your playing tonight. I don't mean to be maybe too blunt, but
Oh, no. It's great. It's I need somebody that's going to be honest with me.
Absolutely. I mean, when you get to this age, you're making important decisions, and you're making you can't. I mean, you got a wife. You got to make sure you're serious about it. And
Oh yeah. If music is going to be my livelihood, I need to be dang good at
it. And that takes honest information. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do, is really help you. But there are certain notes in this that would tell me that I'm playing Autumn Leaves. And if you don't have that flow of pitches, it's hard to tell. Now, for a long time, I've used this term that these are notes of high definition. This is a long time before we used the term high definition the way we use it now. It's like, these are the notes that highly define the chord progression. These are the notes that are packed with information. Like, I play that note to this note, and it's like, I just went from 2 to 5. I just went from 5 to 1. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Well, okay. What are those notes? Now, what most of us call those notes are guide tones. So, what would be the guide tone structure for Autumn Leaves? Do you have any idea how to figure this out?
Would the guide tones be like the 3s and the 7s of each chord?
They tend to be that. Yes.
Okay.
But in what order? How would you do it? Okay, so we're going from D minor to G7. What's the note that's going to say, if I play this note, you're going to say, oh, you just went to the 5 chord?
Would it be C to B?
Yes. Do you know why?
No.
Okay, I'm just getting you to think a little bit. I'm kind of feeling out where you're at the same time. All right, so let's say I said, okay, we're going to play C major and then C minor. You can make that sound very clearly different. If I play immediately you can hear there's a chord change involved there, and I went from major to minor, right? What
Mhm.
are the notes that are going to tell me that I went from major to minor?
The 1, the 3, or the 3, the 6, and the 7.
Well, the 6 doesn't have much information in it, but the
Mhm.
3 on the major chord, flat 3 on the minor chord, 7 on the major chord, flat 7 on the minor chord. Those are half steps that make that really clear that I made that change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and realize that it needs to be half steps. It's half steps that make the world go round. Whole notes don't do that. I mean, whole steps. Whole steps don't make the world go round, but half steps do. So we're looking for the half step motions because that's where all the information is. All right. So what what's the difference in the key between D minor and G7?
Um, well, there are two notes different in those two keys. I don't quite know how to explain it. Like,
Okay, let me ask you to do this a differently. Can you spell a D Dorian scale?
yeah. Oh yeah.
And then could you spell a G Mixolydian scale?
Oh yeah.
Are those not the scales that would go with those chords?
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
they're just different modes of the same major scale.
They're the same notes. There is no difference. You say, wait a minute, I'm supposed to play changes, but nothing changes. How can I play changes if nothing changes? And see, in the generic sense of playing changes, when we use that term, we're saying, hey, do you know the changes of that tune? Hey, can you play the changes? What do we usually think of? It's kind of a generic way of saying, do you know what the chord progression is? Do you play the chords? And you say, yeah, okay. But in a more specific way, playing the changes means that when I change from this chord to this chord, I play the notes that change. And really, this is what the guide tones are the notes that have to change. So now, how can I make you sound? How can I make you hear that I went from the 2 chord to the 5 chord when all the notes are the same? It doesn't make any sense. There's no way I can actually paint that picture, or is there? Wait a minute. We know there is, but what is it? So and you told me what it is, but if you think this through, you say, okay, let's take all the notes on the D Dorian scale and ask ourselves if that works on G7. Let's start with D. Sure, that's the fifth.
Mm-hmm.
E, 6 or 13, fine. F, well, yeah, that's the flat 7. G, that's the root. A, oh, yeah, that's the ninth, no problem. B, well, yeah, that's the third. C,
It's the fourth, and those don't
dis-
sound great.
disqualified. You can't keep the C when you go to G7 because if you do, it's going to sound wretched, as you said. And so the C has got to go down to the B. There's our guide tone. That's our half step that's going to make that clear. So if I go, you just heard it change from the 2 to the 5. Now, if we did the same thinking for the 5 to the 1, it'd be the same thing. It's that again, the flat 7 to the 3. Once you've thought that through, then you don't have to keep thinking it through because you say, oh, it's the flat 7 of the 2 chord to the 3 of the 5 chord. Oh, and it's the flat 7 of the 5 chord to the 3 of the 1 chord. Right? So then you say, okay, 7 3, 7 3. Excuse me. Now, if it's a 2 5 1, it's always going to be that. And that's really the only one. I mean, if you took your classical theory class, I assume it's no, you have to take a classical theory class probably too, right?
Um, I don't know about classical theory. I'm doing theory through Berkeley Online right now. So,
Oh, okay, okay. All right. So if you ask the classical people, they would say, "Oh, from the 5 to the 1. Oh, yeah, the 7 goes down to 3, but the 3 goes up to 1. See, the 3 on a G7 would be a B. Oh, it's got to go up to C. In jazz, we say we don't want to do that.
no.
C would sound stupid. We want the B. We want to keep the B. We want the major 7. So we only have 1. We don't have 2. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, now we do. So what we've got first is a 2 5 1 in C. How would you take the F? What would you call the F major?
A.
A? What do you mean A?
Oh. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So what would I call the F major
Well,
scale?
when I say that, I should be more specific. We're talking Roman numerals here. How do the
Oh
chords?
yeah, if
So
we're
you
in the
got
key of
5-1.
C major, that would be the 4. But if we're in the key of A minor, that would be the 6.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's another thing about classical theory versus jazz theory. Classical theory says you have to stay in the same key and justify everything in the same key until you can prove that it has modulated.
Mm-hmm.
And in jazz, let's say we're doing Satin Doll. The first measure is D minor. This is concert key. Well, let's do it in the trumpet key. E minor, A7, E minor, A7. Then it goes F sharp minor, B7, F sharp minor, B7. You say, well, okay, that's a 2-5 in D, and then it goes to a 2-5 in E.
Mm-hmm.
We just say, hey, it modulated. And we're going to be in Satin Doll, we're going to modulate from 2 sharps to 4 sharps, back to 2 sharps to 3 flats to no 4 flats to I was thinking alto, but 4 flats to 2 sharps. You know, we're going to modulate several times in the key. Okay, you could say in general that this thing's in the key of D, but it's going to modulate through several keys in the process, right? So in this case, I think you can take this as a principle that anytime you see 2 major chords in a row, nearly always the second major chord is still functioning in the key of the first major chord. I would call that the 4 in C. I wouldn't even think about it in A minor at all. It hasn't got anything to do with A minor. Therefore, what scale would you play with on that F major?
Um, what scales could you play, or what should you play?
Well, usually when we talk about what scale to play, we're talking about what's the most inside choice. What's the scale that would best fit that chord? Now, of course, you could always choose some other things that don't fit so well. You maybe choose to play something totally out, you know. But what's the most inside choice would be the question.
Um, the most inside. Geez. I really want to say, and I know this is the wrong answer, but I mean, I'd rather give the wrong answer than the. I think the C bebop scale would go really well over both of those two measures because in the key of F major, you get the sharp 11, you get an extra blue note in there.
So you're talking about the major version of the bebop scale?
Yes, with the flat 7 and the major 7.
Okay, that's not the major version. That's the dominant version.
Okay, the dominant version of the.
And you would not want to play that. You would not want to play that over either of those chords. If you played a bebop scale on that, you'd want to use the one that fits C major, not C dominant. So if you go C, B, B flat, that B flat's going to sound really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So what the bebop scale is when you add an extra chromatic note so that you come out right with the other notes.
Right.
And so if I do this, I'm coming down in C dominant now. I just play straight down the Mixolydian scale. What notes are in the strong positions? Well, there's the 6th, then there's the 4th note of the scale in a strong position, then there's the 9th. If I put the one extra note in, now all the chord tones are in the strong positions. So what you're doing when you do a major bebop scale, in a major scale you put in that flat 6, or you can call it a sharp 5 and the 5. You play both the 5. I'd rather call it a sharp 5 than a flat 6, really. But the word on the street out there is everybody calls it a flat 6. That would be the major version. And yes, that actually would fit over both those chords, but not the one you mentioned. You say, okay, what bebop scale works on minor? Well, it turns out that the extra added note is the major 3rd, and then to the flat 3. But what it is it's the same one that works on the dominant. You know, D minor, I would play G, F sharp, F just on G7, G, F sharp, F, if I was playing bebop scale. Anyway, back to what works on F. That has to stay in the key of C. It's Lydian.
Mm-hmm.
This will seem obvious, but you may never have thought of this. Most people haven't thought about it until I say it. But you're playing a 2 chord, you play the 2 scale. You're playing the 5 chord, you play the 5 scale. You're playing the 1 chord, you play the 1 scale. You're playing the 4 chord, you play the 4 scale.
Mhm.
In other words, you're always going to play the mode that fits whatever the Roman numeral is on that chord. Do you know all those
Right.
modes? You know, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixed Lydian, Aeolian, Locrian. Do you know all those?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. So if it's functioning, well, you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We need to have it function. So if you could show that a chord really is functioning as a six, Dorian would be a really bad choice because it's going to have a very bad wrong note in it if it's really functioning as a six. So if you're playing all the things you are, that's what happens. The first chord is six to two to five to one to four. That actually goes 6 2 5 1 4. So use the sixth chord uses the sixth mode. The second chord uses the second mode. Five the fifth mode. One the first mode. Four the fourth mode. And what that does is it keeps it all in the same key, which we're in the key of C for four measures there, and then we're in the key of A minor for four measures. Back to Autumn Leaves, right?
Mhm.
Okay, now on a minor 2 5, what are the guide tones? And do you know the difference between a major 2 5 1 and a minor 2 5 1?
At some point, somebody explained it to me, and I don't think I have the greatest grasp on it. So, like, a
Okay.
minor 2 5 1 would be like in Autumn Leaves, where it's B half diminished, and then it goes to E minor, and then it resolves to A minor, right? Or A dominant.
No, it goes to A minor. You're right,
A
but it
minor.
doesn't go to E minor. It goes to E7.
Oh, I got the dominant and the minor mixed up. Okay.
Yeah, you need to have that be dominant, and then it has to be altered. So, really, there's two qualifications for something to be a 2 5 1. First of all, the roots have to be right to be a
Mm-hmm.
2 and a 5 and a 1 of that key. And second, the quality structure has to be right. So if we're in a major 2 5 1 and we're saying, okay, D, G, C, okay, those roots are right in the circle. D, G, C. C, F, B flat. There's a 2 5 1 and B flat. Those are the roots for that at least. But it's only truly that if it goes minor, dominant, major. So you have to have, for a major 2 5 1, the roots have to be right, but it also has to be the correct qualities of a 2 to a 5 to a 1. That's why when you look at all the things you are, the first two chords are minor. It goes D minor, this is the alto key, sorry, but D minor, G minor. You say, but look at the roots. D, G, C. Hey, that looks like a 2 5 1, D, G, C. But then it goes D minor, G minor, C dominant. Say, wait a minute, that can't be a 2 5 1. The qualities are wrong. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
The only difference between a major 2 5 1, or in other words, a 2 5 1 in a major key, and a minor 2 5 1, or a 2 5 1 in a minor key, is the quality structure. Because the roots to be a 2 5 1 still have to be the same roots. They still have to be in the circle. So if you go B, E, A, sure enough, they're in the circle. But they have to be half diminished to altered dominant to minor. And when it's truly a 1, I would put minor with a major 7. So if I was playing those chords, half diminished, altered, I've got a sharp 5 and a sharp 9 in there. And then I'm going to 1. Sorry, I played it in your key. All right, I better get that again. Can you hear the 2 5 1? But it's in the minor key. So it has to be half diminished dominant that's altered. When we say it's altered, it means it has sharp 5, sharp 9, sharp 5, flat 9, some kind of combinations of ninths and fifths that are altered together. You could just say, it could also just have flat 9 on it, but it has to be altered somehow.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? All right,
Yeah.
so now what are the guide tones when we go over the minor 2 5 1? Same thing as the major 2 5 1. The 7 goes to the 3. So the 7 of the half diminished chord goes to the 3 of the dominant, the altered dominant chord. Okay, what about the 5 to the 1? So now when you're going 5 to 1, the E7, the flat 7 would be D.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go to the A minor,
You go to C.
yeah, that's not a half step.
No, no, it's not.
It'll sound okay, but it's not definitive. If you see what I mean. So what
Yeah.
will be definitive? Now, the fact that I'm altering means that I have some other possible resolutions. So, for example, the sharp 5 on the dominant chord can go down to the 9 on the one chord and it sounds great. Or sorry, I should have just got my tenor out. I keep mixing keys here because I'm talking in your key and then I start to play and sometimes I play in your key. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
That's actually the flat 9 down to the 5. Now, if I do this, there's the sharp 5 to the 9. So now you're hearing 2-5-1 in A minor. Those are the definitive notes that say, hey, this is what I'm playing. This is what I feel is missing in your playing. I'm not hearing the definitive notes, what I'm calling guide tones.
Mm-hmm.
So now you could actually, based on these principles, you could go through and quickly put the guide tones in this tune. You say, oh, C to B, F to E on the first line, right? We didn't talk about what a guide tone would be from the C major to the F major. That's because there isn't one. There's really nothing that you can play that's different. So in that case, I might play the same. For example, B on C major is major 7, and B on F major is sharp 11. It's just reinterpreted, but I don't actually have a half step there. The only half step would be if I played to the E to the F, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to do that because I don't know. I'm kind of assuming this. I didn't. You seem to understand this a little while ago. Typically on a major chord, I don't want to play the root as an important note.
Mm-hmm.
You want a pretty note, a high tension note like the major 7 or the 9, especially. So I don't really want to go to the root. So if I'm playing on that part, for all practical purposes, you could just treat the C major and the F major as two majors of C major, and it's going to sound fine. You really don't have to play anything that changes on those two chords because nothing really does. But now I'm on the A. Now I'm on the next line, the 2-5-1 in A minor. Okay, I've got the A has to go to G sharp, right? B half diminished the A to the G sharp on the E7, and then what am I going to use to get to A minor? Well, if I went from the G sharp down to the F natural, that's going to be the flat 9. That's a half step to E, which would be the 5th. I'll play that in your key, but yeah, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't really use flat 7 to 3, flat 7 to 3 in a major 2-5-1, in a minor 2-5-1, flat 7 to 3, and then flat 9 to 5 is probably what I would do as default. There's more possibilities than that, but I'd at least do that flat 9 to 5 because there's a half step. Flat 7 to flat 3 is not a half step. That's not going to be as definitive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now, if you're listening, that sounds like a 2-5-1 in major because it went. Now the 2-5-1 in minor. So you're actually hearing 2-5-1 and C major, 2-5-1 and A minor. Now on the C section of this tune, it's where you got another situation. I mean, that's the whole tune because the A section is 2-5-1 in C, 2-5-1 in A minor, 2-5-1 in C, 2-5-1 in A minor, bridge, 2-5-1 in A minor, 2-5-1 in C. Just turn their order, right? But the C section is not an AABA tune, right? It's an AABC tune. The C tune, it does the 2-5-1 in minor, and then when it goes to E minor, all of a sudden I have one major 2-5s. Before we had 2/5 that lasted two measures, whole measure on the 2, whole measure on the 5. Here's a 2/5 that lasts only one measure, 2 counts on the 2, 2 counts on the 5. So just play this with me. You're on your A minor D7. Just go. Yeah, that's how it would resolve. In this case, we don't get to resolve it yet because it's going to go. Then we get to resolve it. Now, okay, you're going A minor D7, then you're going G minor C7. Resolves to F. Yeah, so let's see if you can do the whole sequence. Good. That's going to paint that 3-6-2-5-1 thing right there very clearly. And what's really there is what the guide tones are. So let's play the guide tones through that. So now you're going G, F sharp, F natural, E, and then quickly down to B flat to A. So that's it. Now, what this is like in a kind of a real way is a dot-to-dot puzzle. You've got these particular dots that you kind of need to include in your solo. But how many different pictures can you draw through those same dots? See?
A lot.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the ways that you practice improvisation, because part of what you're practicing is routing. And after a while, you become so good at routing that you find yourself doing routings that you never practiced before. But you get better at routing. So you say, okay, these are my notes. How many ways can I do it? There's the 7-3, 7-3, 7-3. Right? So they're in there. Now, what can I do with it? Put a little Bebop Scale in there. And now I go. So those dots need to be in there. If you're not thinking this way, then you would never think to play F sharp right there. But you need that F sharp. And if you're not thinking the way we're talking on your 2-5-1 and A minor, you wouldn't think to play G sharp. Wait a minute, I'm in the key of C. I'm in the key of A minor. G sharp's not really on your radar. But see, that's a critical color note that I need to hear to know that you're playing Autumn Leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Is this computing?
Yes and no. Like,
okay.
It's kind of like if I sit down and I listen to somebody speaking Spanglish, I get a good portion of it.
Okay.
And then there's like a lot that I'm not getting. So it's like there's a lot that you're saying that like is making sense. Like I get the concept of voice leading and like guide tones. And then there's also just like something not clicking for me right now.
Well, I think if you get the concept that you've got to get the guide tones in there and then you start working with that, you're going to make some progress.
All right.
Because it seems to me, I mean, you're doing a lot of right stuff with your approach to practicing and everything, with trying to learn patterns and trying to transcribe and all that stuff is great. You should be doing that. But somehow it's not making it to the tune.
Yeah.
And I think somehow that connection has to happen, and I think this particular idea, if you should sometime down the road, we should meet again and you should have a tune picked out where you outline the guide tones and you play for me and I can hear the tune. I say, and you don't even tell me what it is. You don't play the head. And I say, that's all the things you are. I can tell what you're playing because I can hear the definitional notes framing out that particular chord progression. That's really the acid test.
All right.
Now this could be maybe simpler. What if I went like this? Yeah, let me start again. Sorry, got caught. I just jumped keys thinking about you. Sorry. But what was I playing? Any idea what tune I was playing? Or what chord progression I was playing or whatever?
Oh, it really felt like you were going down chromatically.
Okay, listen one more time. Yeah, I was trying to make it a lot simpler. So, are you hearing? There's a framework of pitches in here
Mm-hmm.
that should be computing a little bit, and it seems like it's not. What am I really playing? I'm playing the blues.
That even like popped into my head at one point, but I just was like, no, that's too simple. That's not what it is.
See, those are the guide tones that are saying, I just went from one chord to the four chord, back to the one chord, and now I just got to the four chord again. Those are the notes that'll say that. And what are they? Right here, I'm putting a 6 in. Then I'm going 2 5 1, and then I got a turnaround. It's going 1 6 2 5. Those are the notes. Well, what did you hear me play? I was like, here's the those are the notes for the turnaround, right? The last two majors. Do you understand what a turnaround is?
A turnaround is that a backdoor 2-5 or a enclosure?
A 2 5. I mean a dang it, a turnaround is usually the last two majors of a tune that turn you around back to the beginning again.
Okay, it was a lot simpler than what I thought it was.
So,
I've never heard that phrase before.
oh, okay. Well, and sometimes it's called a turn back or a turnaround, but the turnaround, I'm actually just doing 1 6 2 5. So it's going
Rhythm changes.
right. But what do I do around that? Uh, I still got, but I went, put the F sharp down there. But those guide tones are still underneath that, see?
Mm-hmm.
All right, what am I playing now? Sorry.
All right. Was that grooving high?
No.
Okay.
You just said rhythm changes, so that maybe you'd hear it, but those were rhythm changes.
Oh, any particular tune or just rhythm changes?
Just to change, it could be any tune. Yeah.
Well,
And what was I doing? Guide tones. I thought the bridge might tip you off. Back to the A section. All right. The fact that you're not really hearing these things suggests that you just need to work on this kind of approach.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I have a whole thing I do on blues and a whole thing I do on rhythm changes, and you know what? You could probably get. Do you know that I have a YouTube channel?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, you ought to find it and subscribe and get in there. Got a video where I demonstrate how I teach the blues. It's kind of this is all kind of aimed at teachers because it goes with my jazz pedagogy book. But one playlist does. I got another playlist that goes with my saxophone pedagogy book, and then I got some kind of miscellaneous things. And I've got one that coming from like I put all the videos up from when I worked with Jeremy Wells on a jazz pedagogy class, and I just the last one. Let's see. I had one go out yesterday. The last one goes out Saturday of that series, and so it's almost complete. And I just figured he's a French horn player. He never played in a jazz band. He never had the opportunities that you've had to even play in a group that has a rhythm section ever before, And now he's teaching at Ridgeline High School up by Logan, and he has a jazz band. And so he took a summer. We did a spring term jazz pedagogy class, and I figured there's a lot of people out there that are probably like Jeremy who haven't had enough experience playing in a jazz band themselves that would probably profit from this. So I asked him, and he said he agreed. So he let me post it. So there's a lot of stuff there. It's coming down pretty fast in some cases, but it's pre-assuming somewhat that you've had college theory and stuff. But I think and it's not all theory. There's some theory, but there's a lot of other stuff in there too. But and some of it's articulation. I'm working with him, and he's a French horn player, but he took my woodwind workshop class when he was a student at BYU, and so he picks up the saxophone. He's got a saxophone in his office, and he did the etudes on saxophone, even though he's not much of a sax player. But
How'd that go?
to his credit, I mean that's really great that he would be willing to try to do that, and he didn't do terrible, but it gave me a chance to teach a lot of good things. But if you went on the YouTube channel, you could find a lot of information that I would normally give if we were doing regular lessons. And you can find a one on how to teach the blues, and then more advanced blues, and then you can find one on how I do rhythm changes. And you should really look at the one I did on learning Afternoon in Paris.
Afternoon. Oh, okay. Yeah, that is a tune.
Yeah. It's that tune. I don't know if you recognize it or not, but anyway.
Oh, no, I just got the title mixed up with another something in Paris, and it started with an A. I think you know the tune.
Yeah, I do. I sometimes do that too.
Kind of like Autumn in New York and Autumn Leaves get mixed up in my head sometimes, even though I've never played Autumn in New York.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you went there, you could save time with us together and save money, and then you could get some work done on that, and then maybe we meet again where I can give you some reactions to what you've accomplished.
All right. So if I'm going to just learn tunes, are there certain tunes that will like transfer over to like certain changes? I know All the Things You Are has a chord progression. I mean that a lot of other tunes use, and then do you understand my question? Like,
yeah, I do.
What tunes do you recommend? Is I guess
Yeah, and you know, obviously, there's hundreds of tunes written on blues progressions. It'd be really good to spend some time maybe there, and also with rhythm changes. There's a lot of tunes on rhythm changes, so everybody should. I mean, you could go to a gig and somebody calls a tune, and you say, "Man, I don't really know that tune." Oh, it's just rhythm changes. Okay, cool. You know, because you should know them, and I'd probably start there, and
Okay.
then yes, I think for playing in minor, I would work on Blue Bossa and Summertime. And I think Autumn Leaves helps with that too.
Okay.
Just, and then, you know, maybe after you've done those, do Night in Tunisia, just to kind of get yourself playing in minor a little bit more.
Okay.
And I haven't really had time to spend very much time about talking about how to play on the tonic on that, but I would play on a minor with a major seven chord on the tonic, you know, and that's what I was demonstrating for
All
your
right.
ears. By the way, this is being recorded, and you could always ask me to send you the recording.
Please do, because I am sure that I will listen to this recording like 5 or 6 times and get something new from it every time. There's a lot to go over in an hour.
So the recording won't come in for a little while, and then I may forget. So just text me and remind me in a day or something if I have not remembered.
All right. I will probably text you before I make the commute back tomorrow night.
Yeah. Okay. Um, also, I think you should practice the chord study. We talked a bit about scales here tonight, not a lot about chord construction. And I find in jazz, well, just in general in music instruction, most people work on our scales. And, you know, the watchword is like, well, hey, do you know your Dorian scales? Do you know your Mixolydian scales? And so on. But more important, frankly, is do you know your chords?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you shouldn't know your scales, but if I had to choose, of course we don't have to choose, but if I had to choose, it would be chords hands down that are going to make you grow a lot more in your improvisation. And so, what do I mean by that? uh, here's what I would do as a chord study. New key. New key. Now that's the fullest version. I usually teach is 8 chords. With junior high kids, I usually start with 3 chords. Sometimes with high school kids, 3 chords. I just go major, minor, dominant.
All right.
And then after a
Think
little bit,
I
I'll,
can do major to dominant to minor to half diminished to fully diminished. What are the other 3 chords?
yeah, and then I did augmented,
Augmented.
but I did it only as a triad. So 1, 3, sharp 5, 8, and
Okay.
then I did, dominant, and then I did altered dominant. I did it with the sharp 5 and the sharp 9.
Sharp five, sharp nine.
If you learn the full version of it, then you actually have all the chords you need for major 2-5-1s and all the chords you need for minor 2-5-1s, and you have the augmented and diminished chords. So it's useful, and that's how I would practice it. And what am I doing? I'm putting the dominant chord last for a reason, because that's what's going to modulate me to my new key. So if I'm coming down on C, there's my leading tone to the new key. So when I get to the 3 of the dominant chord, that's a leading tone. So up a half step gives me my new key. What happened? I just went from the key of C major to the key of F major. If I'm getting too high on the horn, and about every 3-4 keys you get too high on the horn, then I go to make the modulation. And what is it? It's the 3rd of the dominant chord going up a half step to the new key. Now that modulated me from C to F. When I get on, and I do the sequence in F, the last chord is F dominant, that's going to modulate me to B flat. B flat's going to modulate me to E flat. I'm going right around the cycle, right around the key cycle. By the time I get back, I've done it in all 12 keys. Now that's only part of the exercise, because that's how you start. And it might take you a little while to put all that together, but I think you could probably do it fairly quickly. But there is an amazing amount of ear training that happens as you do this, which is really helpful.
I believe it.
In fact, you might even try to sing everything you're playing. But then what do? You take you pick up your fake book. Do you have a fake book?
I have a real book, and I also have a Pat Metheny real book, which
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So the real book is a fake book, right? It's just
right.
real is it's a play on words, but it's really a fake book. That's a great one. That's a good one. So then what you do? You go into the fake book. You know what? I'm not going to try to drag one out. I'm just going to go into the iRealBook app because this is another place where you can see a lot of chord changes. You could even have this play with you while you do this, actually.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about the iRealBook app.
Well, there's no melodies on it is one of the problems, but and sometimes chords aren't accurate. Yes, that's true. But there's like 1,000 tunes here in the app. So you
Oh,
say, well, 952 right now, almost 1,000. And you say, okay, I'm just going to start with this tune. Well, I'm just going to go something random. Okay. And then I'm just going to read the chords in this tune. Oh boy. See if I can get this to sit up somewhere. Well, they're not too hard. Oh, that's dominant. Back to the last day. But what am I doing? I'm just reading the chords in the rhythm that they're in the tune. So because there's three measures, the first chord I had to go up and down three times. Once for each measure, but then when I have a whole measure, then I just go up and down. And if I have two counts, I can only go up. I can't go down. I have to always fit the rhythm. But what if you warm up with getting all those chords together, and then you actually apply it by reading 3, 4, 5, even 6 after a while pages a day in the fake book. You're going to get really fast at being able to read those chords.
Oh, I bet that sounds like something I definitely need to start doing.
And it's going to give you the ability to quickly recognize what's different from this chord to this chord. Even by half step.
All right.
It helps you get into those guide tones, and I think, it seems to me what's lacking. All right, let me say this one more way. I guess we're about out of time, but we're over time. It's okay, though. You've probably heard of right and left brain type thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, the right brain is the artistic people, and the left brain is the people that
are very logic based.
Scientific, mathematical, and so on. Yeah. Well, what was Miles Davis? What was Clark Terry? Were they right brain or left brain?
Well, the obvious answer seems that they were right brain, but I could be completely wrong. I don't know.
Well, that is the obvious answer, and if we ask anybody on the street, I think that's what they'd say. But actually, you know what? I believe they were in the field of right and left brain thinking. There's a term that they use is called double dominant, which means that both the right and the left hemispheres become dominant equally with each other. And I think that's kind of what you're working on, is to become double dominant. And what develops the right brain? That's your transcribing. And all that listening that you do, and all that stuff is developing your intuition and your right brain, creative ideas and stuff. What's your left brain? That's learning all these scales and chords and theory and stuff. And ultimately, it would be hard. I think we'd be hard pressed to say that Charlie Parker was totally right-brained.
Mm-hmm.
He really didn't understand the chord structure. He didn't know what notes he was choosing against those chords and stuff. I just don't. John Coltrane? No way. I think that they had an equal dose of right brain creativity and left brain knowing what the heck they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is to develop as improvisers. We're trying to develop double dominance. And so I think you've done a lot of work on the right brain, but not enough on your left brain. And so I would say that's where you need to focus for a little while. Get that caught up a little bit with your right brain, and then all that listening and all that transcribing, all of a sudden you've got the technique and the understanding, and it starts to take off in your playing.
Okay.
If you see what I mean.
I see what you mean.
I've had other players. I had a player, I won't tell you who he was, you might recognize him actually, but he came to me having had no jazz experience and wanted to do jazz really bad. And he was a workaholic. I mean, every scale chord I'd give him, he practiced it like crazy. And he could play every scale and chord at fast tempos, but he could not get a melody out on his horn. He played in my big band, but I never gave him a solo, not even once, because he couldn't actually make a coherent solo. And he had all this material. So there's the opposite side of this. He's got a really heavy dose of left brain and not nearly enough right brain.
That does sound like somebody I would know. So thank you for not telling me the name.
Yeah. But then other people have a heavy dose of right brain and not enough left brain. If I had to choose which way to be, I'd rather be that. I'd rather have a lot more right brain happening and then have to work on the left brain.
Okay.
Because it's a lot easier to learn and work on the left brain than it is on the right brain. The right brain takes a long time to mature. The left brain can come together a lot quicker.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm in the right place to be working what I'm working, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ray.
All right. So I wish you all the best on that. And, check out my videos and then get some stuff together based on what we've done and what you learn there as well. And then at some point, I don't know, a month, 2 months, whatever down the road, 3 months, whatever it takes, call me and we'll do a check-in.
All right. All right.
I'll give you some more feedback.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. See ya.
See ya.